So for listeners at home, excuse me. Okay, I realize that listeners at home are joining us somewhat late, but at this point, we've got a language where we're going to specify the meaning of every sentence in the language. And so in the language that we're using to talk about that language, we've got a name for every sentence, which will be a quotational name, yeah, because that gives us a way of systematically naming every sentence in the target language. And we've got a translation or a copy of every sentence in the object language. And then what we do is very simple. We say for every sentence in the target language, we take the name of that sentence, S is the name of that sentence, and then we take P being the translation or copy of that very sentence. And what we say for every sentence of our target language is that that sentence is true if and only if, and then we write out either that very sentence or a translation of that very sentence. Yep. And that'll be right. That'll specify the meaning of every sentence in our object language. So what we want is to get this kind of thing, S is true if and only if P, for every suitable replacement of S and P. And there are going to be infinitely many sentences in our target language. So the truth theory has got to generate, the theory of meaning here has got to generate each of these S is true if and only if P sentences from a finite set of axioms, specifying the references of every individual term in the language. Yeah? So the way to specify the meanings of all the terms of a language is to give a truth theory for that language. This was Davidson's basic idea, which, I don't know, that's one of the 2 or 3 most influential ideas in, what, the last 100 years? Yeah, Melissa? Yeah, I mean, it dominates semantics today. It's very hard to think of live alternatives. So just to see this working, stop me if this goes too fast. Suppose you have a very simple language. So this is a very simple case. Suppose you've just got 2 names in it and 2 predicates. Yeah? So you've got Raleigh, you've got Isaac, you've got Smokes, and you've got Fishes. So how many sentences are there in this language, class? 4, very good, yes. I mean, you say Raleigh Fishes, and I come right back at you, and I say, well, Raleigh Smokes. And nothing daunted, you say, well, Isaac Fishes, and I say, well, Isaac Smokes. And that's it, we've shot our bolt. That's the whole thing. Now we have to go back to the beginning and start again. Okay, so this is a very simple language, yeah? But can we specify the meaning of every sentence in that language in a systemic way? Well, how would you do it? Thoughts? Yeah? For each of the 4 sentences, yeah, you want to specify its truth condition. So you want to be getting Raleigh Smokes is true if and only if Raleigh Smokes. Raleigh Fishes is true if and only if Raleigh Fishes, right? That's the end result you want to get. But you want to get it by specifying something about the terms. Yeah, Raleigh and Smokes and Fishes and Isaac. Yeah. So how do you do that? Labels them. Okay, it depends exactly what you mean by labels.
So for instance, you would have like R or S would be the predicate, and then you have little r, so S or SR.
Okay.
And you have truth like conditions for satisfaction all from there.
Very good. Okay. The only thing about what you're saying is it sounds a little bit like you're giving a translation there. Yeah, but you don't want a translation. Yeah, you see what I mean? You don't just want a translation. You want something different. But I think what you say is just about correct, given that gloss. If you suppose you say Raleigh refers to Raleigh, that's going to be right, right? Yeah? I mean, who else would it refer to? Isaac refers to Isaac. Smokes applies to someone if and only if they smoke. Fishes applies to someone if and only if they fish. Yes? That's all right. And what does it take for a sentence in this language to be true? Well, when you get a sentence like this, A is F, that's true if and only if the predicate applies to what A refers to. So now I specified the meanings of every sentence in the language by specifying the meanings of the components. Yeah? So let's just do this for Raleigh smokes. So I got Raleigh smokes. That's true if and only if. Yes?
The predicate smokes applies to Raleigh.
Applies to what Raleigh refers to.
Raleigh.
Yeah. And we know that what Raleigh refers to is Raleigh. Right? So smokes applies to what Raleigh refers to. That is, if smokes applies to what applies to Raleigh. And what does it take for smokes to apply to Raleigh? Oops. What does it take for smokes to apply to Raleigh? This is really tough. Raleigh has to smoke, yes! Right? Because that's what it says. Right? The predicate smokes applies to X if X smokes. Yeah? Yeah? Okay, so we get the result at the end of all this effort that Raleigh smokes is true if and only if Raleigh smokes. That is the right answer. Yeah? We specified the reference of the constituents and we got out what the whole thing is saying. If we do the same for Isaac fishes. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're reducing the problem of truth conditions, the problem of meaning for whole sentences to the problem of truth conditions, and then the problem of the truth, how you get the truth condition of a whole sentence to the references of the parts. So now, what's the fundamental problem? The fundamental problem is how the elements of a sentence can refer to the objects around us. That's what we really need to get to understand how there can be standards of rightness and wrongness in a language. We need to know how it can be, how it happened that a name refers to a particular thing. I said Raleigh refers to Raleigh. Well, who else would it refer to? As if that was the simplest thing in the world. But that is really the foundational problem in understanding how a language works. How is it that a single name can get hooked up to a particular thing? How is it that the name, the campanile, can get hooked up to that particular object? How is that done? Yeah, that is the basic puzzle. So if we can understand how it comes about that names refer to objects, then we'll understand how it happened that there are standards of rightness and wrongness governing the use of statements involving names. Yeah? That's really the fundamental connect between language and reality, with a connection between a name and an object. I guess, do you have any thoughts how that happens? Yeah? Yep.
Is it like is it a one-way direction where we look at the meaning of a word and the object? We look at the meaning prior to the object.
We look at the meaning prior to the object.
Is that the case here?
Well, we need to know what meaning is. What does that mean? I mean, so far we've got the sign and the object. And you say, well, there's the meaning. Well, what are you talking about?
Can we look at the object and to see how it gives us meaning?
Yeah, you can look at the object. Well, I don't know. I mean, that is a tough one, right? Here I have a simple paperclip, right? Okay, what is its name? I don't know how you do that. Yeah, just staring at the object is not necessarily going to give you a name for it. So how, I mean, you could say, well, it's human psychology. It's a matter of the conventions we use, right? How the name gets signed up to the object. But if you ask, what's a convention? Well, a convention is, I don't know, something like in bridge you have conventions, or where else do you get conventions? Trade fairs. No, what side of the road you should drive on, I guess that's a convention, right? Merely conventional, we say. Usually what that means is there's a bit of language in which we've stated we're going to do it this way. Conventions are established using language. So if you say, well, the way the sign gets hooked up to the object is by way of a convention, that actually isn't addressing the basic problem about how language gets going in the first place. It just presupposes the use of language. If I've already got a functioning language, I can say to you explicitly, I will heretofore use the name Max to refer to that clock. Right? I can stipulate it then, and you can say, okay, that's what a great idea, let's do that. Yeah, but I used language there already. The fundamental question we're trying to address, though, is how do you get a simple set of signs up and running in the first place? So looking at the mind is looking at something to make the connect between the sign and the object is already, seems to be anyway, the mind depends on the use of language. Anything like a human mind presupposes that you're embedded in a society using language. So how does this happen? Is the connection between the sign and the object set up by way of something the mind does? Well, what could that be? The operations of the mind presuppose you've got a language. Yep.
So I think Chomsky talks about this concept of psychic continuity.
Psychic continuity.
Right. So he calls up the story of the ship of Theseus and how they're replacing all the parts of the ship one by one. So there's this giant Greek ship and it's made out of wood, and they just take off a piece and replace the piece and throw the piece of wood in the water, take off the piece and replace another piece. And it's still the ship of Theseus every time you replace
right.
the wood. But if there's
very
something
good.
behind you collecting
all the bits,
all of the original pieces,
yeah.
You're not going to call that second ship that's made of those pieces the ship of Theseus, even if it's comprised of the same parts. So you have this kind of inherent continuity of like a sense of what the ship of Theseus was in the first place. And
yeah.
it's still mysterious, but I think that there's like that aspect of psychic continuity.
The ship of Theseus is an important puzzle. I'm not yet seeing how it helps here, because this is a thesis about the ship itself, right? You're telling me something about the ship itself. I want to know something about the name of the ship. Yeah, how the name of the ship gets hooked up to the thing.
Yeah, I think the reference is continuous, you know, and it's
The object is continuous, right? But how does the name get hooked up to it? Whatever it's like. You see what I mean? You're telling me something important and interesting about what the thing itself is like. But I want to know the connect between that thing and something else, namely the name. Yeah.
I don't know. I just think that the concept of that continuous nature of the name, or regardless of the
yeah. That's presupposing, I see that makes sense, but that's presupposing what we want here. You're saying you've got the concept of the continuous thing, and you've got the thing, but that's presupposing a link between the concept and the thing. Yeah, that's what we want to try and get at. How did that happen? And that is the puzzling thing. You get basic atoms, you get basic molecules, you don't get them referring to things. This is just another way of replaying that thing about you don't get standards of rightness or wrongness in the natural world. You just put together a whole bunch of atoms. You don't get something that's referring to any object. How come when you put together the molecules to make a human being, you somehow got something that's capable of referring to an object? Where was the trick worked? How did that happen? And the really difficult thing is to address that in terms that don't just presuppose what you're trying to solve. And in the Frege reading, Frege says there must be something incomplete about what we've said about meaning so far. Because all I said about the meaning of a part of or the meaning of a name or a referring expression is that it stands for an object. Right? Here is the name, there is the object. You hook up to the name to the object, now the name means something. And Frege says that cannot be the whole story. Because if you think about the terms, the morning star and the evening star, the morning star refers to the planet seen in the morning, right? The evening star refers to the planet seen in the evening. It happens to be the same planet, but they are clearly terms with different meanings. So there must be more to meaning than just what thing it stands for. Yeah? Otherwise, these two statements, the morning star is the morning star and the evening star is the evening star, would mean just the same thing. But they don't.
You can't say the morning star is the evening star.
You can't say that. You can, exactly. And that too, and that is saying a third thing. Yeah? Yes? The morning star is the evening star, is an astronomical discovery. It's not just a matter of reflection and meaning that tells you that that's true. Yeah? So Frege's point is there's got to be more to meaning than we've so far uncovered. His picture is there are three things in the analysis of the meaning of a name. There's the sign, the combination of words of the letter, the morning star or the evening star or Raleigh or whatever it is. Then there's what Frege calls the sense of the sign, and that fixes the reference of the sign. So if we know what sense is, then we are home. Yep. So Frege's task in those 6 paragraphs that I'm suggesting you read for Friday is to explain why we need the notion of sense and how it hooks up language to the world. If we can crack that, then we've begun in earnest on the explanation of how there can be standards of right or wrong for the sentences that we use, how there can be meaning and truth conditions. Any last questions? Okay, I'm quite sure numbers will have dropped off and we'll have a more comfortable time next Friday. Okay, thanks guys.